All right, so we're back for another deep dive. You guys sent in a bunch of NBA games, and that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. It's not just about who won and lost, but really getting into, the key moments, the big plays, and figuring out, like, what does this actually tell us about these teams right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Some really interesting matchups in there. Like, we've got Miami and Philly, Sacramento and Detroit, the Bucks and the Pelicans, Golden State and Houston, and then Denver and Indiana. So, yeah, we've got a lot to break down.
Yeah, it's like a full plate of NBA action, right? And,
Mhm.
our goal is to give you guys listening that real in-depth understanding of these games without, like, completely overwhelming you with stats and stuff.
Right.
So, yeah, consider this your shortcut to really feeling like you're completely in the loop on all these matchups. So, where should we jump in first?
Well, you had mentioned being really curious about some of the Eastern Conference matchups. And, Miami and Philly, that's a great place to start, I think.
Okay.
And, the Heat, they took care of business in that 117 to 105.
Yeah, I was looking at the box score, and it just seems like Miami's offense was really clicking. Like, it wasn't just one guy having a huge night, right?
No, that's a really great point, and that's something that stands out. They had this really impressive depth in their scoring. Like Duncan Robinson, he came off the bench and had 21 points, and he only took 8 shots.
Wow.
I mean, that's incredibly efficient.
Yeah.
So he's providing this huge spark. And then you have, Tyler Herro with a solid 20 points. And then Kel Ware, man, this guy was all over the boards, 19 points and 17 rebounds.
17 rebounds, wow.
So when you have that kind of production and coming from, multiple sources, it just puts so much pressure on the other team's defense.
And especially 17 rebounds from a rookie, like, that's the kind of impact that can really swing a game. And it sounds like the Heat really took control in that fourth quarter.
They did, yeah. That fourth quarter, they went on a 16-3 run. I mean, that was pretty much the game right there. And it's really interesting because what it shows you is their ability to execute and just kind of elevate their intensity when the game is on the line. And that's often the sign of a team that has, a real chance to make a deep run.
Yeah. Now, the 76ers, they also had some guys putting up big numbers, right?
Yeah.
Like Lonnie Walker IV and Quentin Grimes, they both had really big scoring nights.
They did. I mean, each of them scored 29 points.
Yeah.
Right? That's some serious offensive output from 2 players. But I think it's important to kind of connect this to the bigger picture of their season. Despite those individual performances, they weren't able to close out the game, and their losing streak is now at 12.
Oof. Yeah, that's rough.
Which really raises the question of, like, is individual scoring enough to overcome other team deficiencies?
Right. It's like you can have 2 guys with maybe even what you'd consider great individual performances. But if the team as a whole isn't really, clicking maybe some defensive issues down the stretch, those things are really going to cost you.
It seems like it. I mean, what stood out to me was just how that balanced team effort from the Heat, especially in that fourth quarter, they were able to just negate those strong individual performances from Philly. So I think, for you as a viewer, the takeaway here might be how crucial those bench contributions could be, and also just that ability to really lock in when the game is on the line.
Okay, so let's move out west. Now, you had flagged the Kings and the Pistons game. The Kings won that one, I think, a bit more comfortably.
Yeah, 127 to 117.
Okay, so it seems like Sacramento's offense was really firing on all cylinders.
This game really underscored their offensive firepower when they're clicking, and it's like they were scoring at will,
Yeah, the source material I was looking at highlighted their dominant offensive performance. Zach LaVine had himself a monster night, 37 points, geez.
Yeah, and it wasn't just him, DeMar DeRozan added 28. And then you have Domantas Sabonis with 27. So when you have 3 players scoring that effectively, it just becomes incredibly difficult for any defense to contain them. It just really stretches the floor.
Yeah, it sounds like they were really efficient with their shooting, especially from 3-point range, and really made the Pistons pay for those mistakes.
Yeah, they were. High shooting efficiency allows you to build leads really quickly and then maintain control of the game.
Right.
And, capitalizing on turnovers, it's like getting free points,
Oh, absolutely.
And not only does it boost your score, but it can be really demoralizing for the other team.
Right.
So it speaks to, their discipline, their focus, and their ability to execute their game plan.
Now, for the Pistons, Cade Cunningham had a pretty decent game, 25 points and 9 assists. But I guess it wasn't enough to really keep them in it.
Yeah, he's a very talented player, but when a team like Sacramento is just operating at that level offensively and, limiting their own errors, strong individual performances from the other team often aren't enough. So for you, the insight from this game is likely the impact of that efficient, multifaceted team offense and not giving away easy opportunities to a high-scoring team like the Kings.
Okay, let's jump back to the East for what looks like a much closer one. The Milwaukee Bucks versus the New Orleans Pelicans.
Okay.
The Bucks just squeaked out a victory there, 111-107.
Sounds like this was a real battle. You know, the kind of game where both teams had to really fight for the win?
Yeah, it was a real nail-biter. Gary Trent Jr., he led the Bucks in scoring with 29 points, and Brook Lopez had, a classic Brook Lopez double-double. But I think what really stood out to me is the Bucks bench really played a crucial role in this one, and that's kind of interesting given what we were just talking about with the Heat, right?
Absolutely. Kevin Porter Jr., he came off the bench, had 20 points. That was key in such a close game. That kind of scoring punch from your reserves can be the difference maker, especially when, maybe your starters aren't having their best night or the other team is really focusing their defensive efforts on them. It really shows the value of having, reliable contributors throughout your roster.
And it looks like the Pelicans were actually missing some of their key starters in this game.
Right.
So the fact that they were able to keep it that close is even more impressive, I think.
Yeah, it is. I mean, for guys like Antonio Reeves and Yves Missy, for them to step up and perform well under those circumstances, that says a lot about their team's depth and the coaching staff's ability to prepare everyone. Even though they didn't get the win and kind of performance from their role players, it's a positive sign.
Right.
So for you, the takeaway here is really how crucial that next man up mentality is, and having a strong bench can really make a difference when you're facing challenges like missing some key starters.
Now, next up we have what looks like a bit of an upset in the West. The Houston Rockets, they actually snapped the Golden State Warriors' winning streak.
Wow.
106-96.
That is that's where things get really interesting. The Warriors had built up some serious momentum, so for the Rockets to come in and stop that, it's a huge result.
Yeah, and Alperen Sengun for the Rockets, he was a beast. He had a really nice double-double.
He was. He had 19 points, 14 rebounds. I mean, that's a strong contribution, really establishing their presence in the paint. And then Dylan Brooks had a great shooting night, led them with 24 points, and Jalen Green shipped in 21 as well. So it looks like it was a well-distributed offensive effort for Houston.
Yeah, but the big shocker here has got to be Steph Curry. He had a quiet night. I think only 3 points on 1 for 10 shooting.
Yeah, that is highly unusual for him. When a player of his caliber has an off night like that, it puts an enormous burden on the rest of the team. It really highlights how even the most consistent superstars, they can have games where their shots just aren't falling, and it becomes crucial for everyone else to step up.
Right. And it seems like the Rockets' defense, they really stepped up and they were able to capitalize on those fast break opportunities.
Exactly. Their defensive intensity clearly disrupted the Warriors' offensive rhythm. They were limiting those open looks and then, getting out in transition, scoring those easy fast break points that provided a crucial offensive boost for them. So for you, the key takeaway here is even the biggest stars, they can have off nights. And a strong, cohesive team defense, coupled with taking advantage of those transition opportunities, it can overcome even a really potent offense like the Warriors, especially when their star player is not playing at his usual level.
All right, last but not least, we've got a really high-scoring game here between the Denver Nuggets and the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers ended up winning it 125-120.
This sounds like it was an offensive explosion,
Yeah.
with one really amazing individual performance that unfortunately wasn't enough for the win.
Yeah, Nikola Jokic, he was just phenomenal for the Nuggets. 41 points, 15 rebounds, 13 assists. I mean, a triple-double of that magnitude, and they still lost.
I mean, that's remarkable. That really is a testament to his incredible all-around skill and impact on the game. To put up those kinds of numbers and still be on the losing side, it really underscores that basketball is a team sport. And individual brilliance, while exciting to watch, doesn't always guarantee a victory.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And for the Pacers, Miles Turner, he led the way, 24 points. Obi Toppin off the bench had a really big game, too, 22 points. And it sounds like they were pretty resilient coming back from a deficit in this one.
Yeah, overcoming a 13-point deficit in the first half,
Mm-hmm.
that demonstrates their grit and determination. And again, we saw this with Miami. Capitalizing on those turnovers, especially late in the game, proved to be the difference. Those extra possessions, those scoring opportunities, they can completely change a close game.
Absolutely. And I think it's worth noting that both teams were missing some pretty important players. Jamal Murray for the Nuggets and Pascal Siakam for the Pacers.
Right.
So it was really an opportunity for some of those other guys to step up and show what they can do.
Exactly. And it highlights the importance of having that deep roster where players are ready to step in, and contribute when their number is called. So for you, the final key takeaway here is even those, amazing individual performances, they might not always get you the win, but being able to capitalize on your opponent's mistakes in those crucial moments can often be the deciding factor.
Okay, so, we've looked at all 5 of these games that you've highlighted. What are some of the big picture trends or themes that really stand out to you?
Well, we definitely saw the importance of offensive depth in those wins by Miami and Sacramento. Shooting efficiency, particularly from three-point range, seemed to be a major factor for the Kings. We talked about bench performance. That was huge for Milwaukee in their close win. The Rockets really showed how effective a strong defensive effort can be in disrupting even those high-powered offenses. And then finally, Indiana just showed the importance of resilience and capitalizing on those late-game opportunities.
Yeah, those are all really interesting observations. And, thinking about these individual game results, do you think they offer any kind of broader insights into, where these teams might be headed as the season goes on?
Absolutely. These games give us a snapshot of each team's current strengths and weaknesses. You can see which teams have that consistent scoring punch throughout their lineup, who can rely on their bench to provide, meaningful minutes, and who has the mental toughness to execute in those pressure situations. Those are all factors that are going to play a huge role as we get closer to the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, even a single game can have that kind of ripple effect, right?
Right.
Like it can impact a team's confidence, maybe lead to some adjustments in the rotations, and definitely affects their standing in what are becoming some pretty tight playoff races in both conferences.
Momentum is a huge force in the NBA.
Right.
A big win can really get a team rolling, while a tough loss can expose areas that need to be addressed. So, yeah, these individual games, they really do contribute to the larger story of the season for each of these teams.
So there you have it. We took those 5 NBA games that you guys were curious about, and we really dug into them, tried to highlight those key performances, the turning points, and, those big takeaways without, drowning you in a sea of stats and numbers. Hopefully this gives you a much clearer picture of what went down and why it matters.
And considering these results, here's something to think about. Which of these are emerging team identities? Whether it's the resilient underdog, the offensive powerhouse, the defensive stalwart, which one of those is going to be the most successful as we get closer to the playoffs? And are there any individual performances that stood out to you that might be a sign of, a player kind of shifting their role on the team or having a bigger impact going forward? It's going to be fascinating to see how all these storylines develop